Coming up in this episode of Cars Plus, we're going to test Rubber Renue, a product suggested to us as a possible way of softening old rubber. We'll see if it works. We'll also see if there are other solutions. Stay tuned to see both the results and our ultimate ending. Let's see what we can do by taking our subject rubber piece out of the fluid it's been sitting in for 24 hours. It's definitely changed shape. It is smoothed out a bunch on the back, but I gotta be honest, so far it's not looking real possible because it still seems awful hard to me. Seems quite hard. It's not as bad as it was, but I definitely would not refer to it as soft or rubbery. It's still quite hard. I'm debating about putting it back in and letting it keep soaking for another day. Given that that didn't do it, I'm going to give it a shot for another day of soaking. After 2 days of soaking, our little part here has not softened up anything appreciable. I've also tried heating it up to about 200, tried heating it up to about 350. But that product will not work on something that old or that thick. Remember, this, you can see, about 3/8 inch thick. And that didn't appreciably soften it. The part really goes underneath this top, which is the tail light from a Spirit of Motion Graham. And it's supposed to hold this lens in place against the top so that you don't break the lens and it doesn't vibrate. Well, this is not going to work, not with Rubber Renue. I'm not saying Rubber Renue is totally bad, because it might not be. I'm not going to say that Rubber Renue might not work for something thin. It probably would, but it won't work into something that's this thick. Solution's going to have to be, I'm going to have to mold this in RTV rubber and make a brand new urethane rubber piece instead. Having not been happy with the original rubber part for a recast, I've spun up a brass master here. We're going to make an RTV mold because the Rubber Renue didn't solve the old one. It's not as nice as making a proper one, so as I said, brass master. Now we're going to use some thin plywood and we're going to make our mold box. Our brass master is fastened to a piece of vent window glass. This is one of those things that doesn't have to be pretty, it has to be effective. This is scrap material. I keep any scrap material that I run, for example, on the laser cutter that I have, and that's what we have here. We're just going to hot melt it in place. Hot melt glue is fast and works perfect when you're going to make a simple one-sided RTV mold like we're going to make here. Get our last side here. Again, remember, it's going to have threads of glue. You want to make sure they're not on the top of your master pattern that you got. Our last side. And we're going to spray with a little bit of UMR paintable mold release, just so things don't stick so much. As you can see, it's clear. Now today, I'm going to use Plat 40 by Alumilite. It's a silicone-based RTV. Now, don't automatically assume that's always the right answer. Silicones are much more complicated than that. Depends on what we're molding. You know, from whether we're molding a urethane or whether we're molding to make chocolates, for example, or we're molding plaster, etc. It is much more complicated, even if you're just saying you're doing urethane, than saying automatically Alumilite Plat 40 is the answer. That's what I'm going to use today, but don't automatically assume that's the answer. It really requires a whole video on what you have to take into consideration to do this if you're going to be choosing what you're going to use for a RTV for your project. Now, Alumilite Plat 40 is a 1-to-1 mixing ratio. I'm going to take down a scale here that I can adjust. I'll put a little cup on there. These are just Dixie cups, or at least what I would call Dixie cups, or old style bathroom cups that you can still buy. You put it on there, adjust to 0, and now we're going to open our Plat 40. Each side's going to get the exact same amount. We don't need all that much, and if we don't mix enough in the first place, we can do the same thing again, mix some more. So we don't have to panic if we don't have it enough on the initial fill. This product's supposed to have a 35-minute work time, which should work fine for what we're going to do, because we also have to de-air it. So we'll pour in some of this. Probably going to pour about 2 ounces each side to start with, which may be enough to do the whole thing. All you're interested in is equal ratios in the little cups. You don't really have to spend all that time getting everything perfectly figured out as to what's going to go in here. In this case, I will have too much, I think. I'm actually going to put some back. Look at it a little bit. I'm going to put it back so I get down to about 1.5 ounces. I think it's a little heavy. That's better. That's right on 1.5. Put a little bit back. Yes, you can do that. I haven't mixed it with anything. Nothing wrong with that. You may notice I'm constantly wiping stuff off. You want to do that. Silicone is contaminant for paint. So now we'll do 1.5 ounces of the opposite side. There we go. Now, as I noted, I'm wasting a little bit. No matter what you do, you're going to waste some. You can use disposable plastic spoons. Even if you use the disposable plastic spoons, though, you're going to waste some on the spoon. So basically, it's pretty much inevitable you'll waste some of the material, however you dish it out. Now that we've got 1.5 ounces on each side, we can mix them together. Now you'll notice that if I pour them both together in there, I won't have enough room. So I'll get in our Dixie cup. Remember, I told you I can do it in halves or whatever. It doesn't make any difference, because we're just going to do it one right after the other. So we'll take about half of each one and pour it in here. And do another little cup so we've got enough room to mix. Now, of course, I could get a bigger container, but this is what I've got here. Most of the time I'm doing small stuff anyway, so this is generally good enough. I've got 2 of them together. A little scrap stick for a stir paddle. If you don't have a little scrap stick, you can always use popsicle sticks. You can get a hold of those at the grocery store. You want to mix this up real well. Well, it's going to get mixed some more because when we de-air it, it's going to boil effectively. And it's going to get mixed more then too, but it doesn't mean you don't want to mix it real well now. Now remember, I told you you can do it without de-airing, but you stand a chance of getting imperfections you wouldn't otherwise get. The best way to pour something like this is to start off in a corner and let it self-flow and pour it in a small stream, which is what's happening here. There are some RTBs that will pretty much self-de-air. but most of them have enough viscosity that you're going to want to do a vacuum chamber if you have access to it. We're going to take the rest of our material, which looks like this 1.5 ounces per side is going to be about perfect. We're going to let most of it go in here, and again we'll stir up the rest of the material. Now we're going to mix it up real well again. Remember, I told you this one has a 35-minute work time, so that's where we can mix it, pour it, and de-air it. We're going to want to de-air it for about 15 minutes. Get that pretty well mixed. We'll pour this in. Now you notice I got quite a bit over the part. You want it to be stable when you're done. You don't want a real flimsy bottom, because we're going to turn this over and we're going to cast it. And if you have a flimsy bottom by not having enough on your part, it's not going to turn out. It'll deform the part you're going to make. This one that's mixed up I'll keep so I know when everything's ready. Right now there's millions of little bubbles in there, and we want to get rid of those so we get a very perfect casting. Now the truth is, we don't have to get rid of it all everywhere. We really have to get rid of it on the part. So technically, if you have a few bubbles on the top when you're done de-airing, it's fine. Here we have our finished mold. This is 24 hours later. Take it apart. You can see, as I had mentioned previously, this is basically a transparent mold material we're using this time. You can see that the hot melt comes off pretty well without even using a razor blade. But we'll get a razor blade to clean it up a bit here in just a moment and take it off the glass. I think you'll be bored by that. We're going to show you how we get the mold ready for production. First, we're going to work on popping out our master. There's our master. And you see we got some flash from the mold rubber here. We'll get rid of that and just see how sharp this X-Acto blade is. Now, you'll always get a meniscus along the edge of your mold on the back against your mold box. But if you don't remove this, it's going to distort things when you go to cast your mold. So I'm cutting it off and getting rid of it. This will happen every time you do this. But you don't need to, again, be really neat. You just want to take off the meniscus so everything will sit flat when I set it, for example, back on a piece of glass. That's where it would be normally cast. We wouldn't cast on a towel. We just have a towel sitting here. Now, on the top side, if you've got something that's also causing you troubles, you can take it off. Again, we're not really concerned with beauty here. The part that matters to us is that mold cavity. The rest of this doesn't matter so much. But I'm going to trim off this little excess I've got, as long as I've got a nice sharp knife to do it with. Number 11 X-Acto blade knives that are fresh do a really good job with this. You can also use single edge razor blades. Now, for those who are wondering, can I make parts super cheap for myself? Well, yeah, if it's something that nobody else is going to have, yeah, you can make the part. I'm doing it because Kenny's car needs it, and probably most other Spirit of Motion cars are going to need it also, because these rubber pieces, I do not know of somebody else using this particular part, and unfortunately you need it both for sealing the tail lamp and also to properly snug down the lens without breaking it or letting it rattle and be loose and making all kinds of noise for you. You notice I'm taking out the little bit of material that got under our part, because we did have it set down with a little hot melt. That does give it a possibility of getting a little bit under it. This isn't very thick, but we don't want it there, because this is a one-sided mold. When we go to cast it, and I'll give you a little explanation of what's done. When you cast it, you'd set it on a piece of glass that you've waxed. You pour your material in here, and then you'll put another piece of glass that's waxed over it, because this is an item that can have a flat back, You know, it does, as you can see, I had hot melt holding it in place, but the flat back allows us to easily make a one-sided mold. There we have a mold that we'll be able to cast with. As I said, these little teeny bits of ragged edge really won't hurt anything. We'll be able to cast one side with that, and we will get exact replicas, but of course now they'll be made of rubber. There you have a simple mold method to solve the problem that the rubber Renue didn't. Like and subscribe. We'll see you later.